Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dreaming Forward podcast. I'm your host, Kalyn Wilson. Today, we're going to be talking about the social component of ESG. And as the title states, is social schmosocial. Social is one of the most misunderstood aspects of sustainability and ESG at large because it often involves areas where the company thinks that they're already winning or that they don't want to admit that they are not showing up fully. So, the social aspect of ESG involves everything from ethical supply chains to paying living wages to your employees to making sure that you have protections for marginalized groups such as women or the LGBTQ plus community or BIPOC employees. The social component also involves the way you interact with the community. So if you think about a social engagement with the town nearby, are you making a lot of noise? Are you showing lights brightly? Is there a lot of garbage nearby to the point where it's creating a hazard for the community around you? So, again, all of those are aspects of the social component of ESG. So let's break down some pieces. Let's start with the aspect of your workforce. So, how do you treat employees? And the social aspect of ESG should ensure that your employees are treated with the same level of respect as you would your best and most prized customer. So if you think about the concierge experience that we give to our highest paying customers, we want to make sure that their needs are met proactively. In fact, we want to anticipate their needs and respond to them before they even have a chance to say that it's a need. We want to make sure that we are going above and beyond. We want to make sure that we are driving loyalty and we want people to stick around. So the question would be, do you do that for your employees too? What have you done in the last year, or scratch that, let's even think since the pandemic, to let your employees know how much they mean to you and that they're not just a line item, that you truly care? And then the next question to that is, how did you scale that effort? So was it just a one-time thing? Was it just a one-time bonus when the pandemic first hit to say thank you for putting your life on the line to stock these shelves? And then we turned around and laid you off 28 months later? Or was it, we're going to give you this bonus, and by the way, we know that we've had some safety concerns in the workplace, so we're going to fix those too. All of those things matter because companies are increasingly being put under a microscope for how they treat their employees. And as I stated in the opening video, we ain't started moving to Mars just yet. So we only got one place where humans are living, and that's Earth. So you can only burn out your reputation so much before it just gets to be way too much. And so you want to avoid reaching that cliff with your employer brand because sometimes you might hit a point of no return and you can't come back. There is a famous company that's in the news right now for actions that, in my estimation, reflect poor ESG principles and strategy. I don't think that this company will be able to recover. I feel pretty confident in saying that. Now, what that will mean for the company itself, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that it's going to end up being on its last leg. And there is a saying that your people are your most important and valuable resource. They hold organizational knowledge, they hold technical knowledge, they hold strategic visions and ideations that will propel your company forward. So, why are they often our last consideration when we think of the financial solvency and wealth and sustainability of our company? The swiftness with which employees have been laid off at companies has been quite jarring for a lot of people, I think. And I think it is because it goes beyond the idea that jobs aren't safe, that everybody should always have your resume polished off. That part, we kind of get it. But it is this idea that people have been dismissed in a way that dehumanizes them. And I think that that reflects the social aspect of sustainability for sure. Because if we cannot treat our most precious resource with just basic human dignity and respect, then why are we doing what we're doing? The other side to this is that our employees are our customers too, in many ways. And if they aren't now, they will be, or maybe they were before. And so we're hurting the long-term sustainability financially for the company from a revenue standpoint because people don't want to buy from us. They don't want to be around us. They don't want to use our products or services. There are some companies that I go out of my way to avoid using, visiting. I don't want them to get ad clicks, anything, any views from me. And I used to work there. And it's because I used to work there. And I'm like, what can I do to make sure I never support this company again? This is an active thought of mine. And I'm not alone. So it's important to think about the ways in which you could be tanking your own brand. Another aspect to the social side of ESG is around ethical supply chain management. And this is everything from diverse suppliers to making sure that the suppliers you use have ethical practices as well. And there are some companies who do that really, really well. But one thing that I think companies, especially if you are considered tier one or top of the food chain or first in the ecosystem, meaning you're a very large company, tons of influence, tons of power, tons of market share. As a part of your financial planning for ESG work, I think you need to up your budget for investing in supporting those companies who eat from you to scale up their ESG efforts. Here's what I mean there. If you know that you are now requiring all of your vendors or suppliers, right, to have sexual harassment policies in place. So you're requiring that if something happens related to sexual misconduct, they should have a policy in place to be able to handle that. You don't want to necessarily just leave that in their hands to solve because they might not have the personnel, they might not have experience planning for that, they might not know who to call, all these things. And if anything goes wrong, you know that it's going to be a significant liability to you. You may need to invest in starting an initiative, a program, a partnership, a development opportunity, whatever you want to call it, where you help them by investing in helping them scale up those policies. And that could go for any number of things. It could be employee resource groups and affinity groups. It could be anti-racism efforts. It could be, again, the sexual harassment or misconduct efforts. All of those things are really important. And so, again, depending on where you sit in the ecosystem for your industry, you might end up having to either foot the bill or playing a significant influencer role just to make sure that it gets done. And I think being prepared for that matters, but also as a part of your strategy, thinking of how you will position that ask to the people who will need to take the investment. Because some folks are going to be like, whew, thank you. I'm grateful. Didn't know. Other people may be resistant. You might get some pushback because folks may say, well, why aren't you investing in my community, this social issue, etc. So you have to map all of that out, but it is extremely important because it needs to be done. Because again, the last thing that you want to happen, which is a worse thing, is that you've put in all of this work to get yourself together and y'all have all these policies in place and you're doing this dope work and you're got an amazing brand and people love you. And the person who supplies the rugs for your building, you find out that they're running what's considered a sweatshop. Bad move, right? It's not good. And so then that starts to impact you. And so all of your hard work has now been tanked because of this one issue that really wasn't on you, but you become accountable because you were the person or the entity with power and influence. So you want to just be thoughtful there. Another aspect of social that you want to think of is how do you manage your engagement with the community at large? So I talked in the intro episode about Silicon Valley and its impact on the larger Bay Area community. And you could think of that with any company. Another really good example is GM and Flint. So, of course, if you've ever seen Michael Moore's famous movie, I don't know why the name is escaping me now, but it came out, I want to say, in like the early 2000s, about GM and Flint and what happened when the GM plant shut down and how Flint has never really quite recovered. All of the second, third, and fourth degree consequences of just that one business decision, it ends up having an impact on you because you never lose your place in that story. If you think about a really good story or fairy tale, as this character moves through the story, you see a bunch of little mini villains usually come into play. And even though they might be trying to fight the big villain, or even though they might have the epic battle at the end, those other epic battles don't erase what the mini villains did. So the mini villain that the hero had to fight in chapter 2 doesn't become obsolete or disappear from the story just because we're on chapter 16. And depending on what that mini villain did in chapter 2, it could have a significant impact on what happens in chapter 16. So, the short version of what I'm trying to say is don't be the villain in chapter 2. Because you never lose your place in that story. Even now, again, go back to GM and Flint, which this is not me trying to just dump on GM by any stretch of the imagination. But what I am trying to say is that when we trace the story, for example, of Flint's decline, GM closing is seen as having a catalyzing effect on that decline, even getting to the water crisis. But what happens when there is no company there to be an entity to stand up for that group or that city or that neighborhood? Because let's be honest, companies not only benefit from pulling resources in the community as far as workers, water, natural gas, whatever the case may be, traffic, streets, land, resource, all kind of stuff. But they also benefit from having influence and power. So there are certain companies where the place where their headquarters is, every street, the elementary schools, the theaters, what is it? The parks, the libraries are named after the founder or famous CEOs. That's just how it goes. Because you want that presence in the community. You want that social uh, influencer status. You want people to have an affinity and a recognition to your brand that everywhere they go, they are saturated by and immersed in your brand. But the flip side to that is that saturation comes with a level of accountability and responsibility. So the question is, how much of the brunt of responsibility are you willing to take for having that influence because you are a presence in that community? This goes deeper than just the Christmas toy giveaway or the book bag giveaway or the one-time scholarship to the local valedictorian. It's deeper than that. It could mean that you invest in workforce development programs for teens. So I remember I helped to organize at one company a program because of the nature of their work. It was largely based in the trades. And so you could hypothetically come out of high school or definitely by about 21 be prepared to work a full-time job in this company with benefits, be in line for the pension, all of these amazing things. But for some reason no one had thought to draw from local high school students that were in the programs to prep them to have the appropriate certificates and licenses and all of that stuff to do this work. And so I helped to develop this program and say, hey, this high school is prepping. They're doing state of the art development work with these teens. Why are we not drawing here? Because the average age of the people who work in this department is pretty much leading toward retirement. So what would happen if all the people who could retire, if they retire, we wouldn't be able to function. So now let's start a pipeline of talent. And you got people who are in great jobs, paying great wages, great opportunity, stable work, et cetera, all the things that people love. That should be a shoe in. That's an example of a social effort. I've had conversations with other companies about how to do the same things at high schools in particular. And I think that that's something that is going to continue growing. So if we think about trends in social, that is going to continue because as college increasingly becomes, to be honest, less sustainable. So the current higher ed model if you pay this exorbitant amount of money to get this degree, even the setup of gen ed and then your major class, the whole thing with college will probably change over the next 10 to 20 years for sure, maybe even sooner than that, because things seem to be kind of escalating. If you look at college enrollment rates dropping, college dropout rates increasing, the value of college degrees, again, just our whole perspective on that has changed significantly over the past 10 to 20 years. And so, how your company invests in middle school and high school students and preparing them to have career mind, career focus, to be thinking about building certain skills, to have affinity to your brand is going to be important. Sidebar. And it's funny because I just saw them. Actually, you know what? This is interesting. I just was at the National Minority Supplier Diversity Conference. It was held in New Orleans. And it was my first time going, so I didn't know what to expect. But there were tons of companies there. Had a wonderful time. Met so many amazing people. And I was going to see Ford and GM because they were there. And again, I'm from Detroit, so I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna miss going to see Ford and GM. Are you kidding me? But on my way to turn the corner, I ended up bumping into this company called Lear Corporation. And y'all know normally I don't really call out my past jobs by name, but I'm gonna call them out because it's important. So I passed Lear Corporation and I was stopped in my tracks because Lear Corporation, who is known as a tier one automotive supplier, was my very first corporate job. I got that job as an internship the summer after I graduated from high school. And I was working in corporate purchasing of all departments. And it was so fascinating because, so this was 2003. That's when I graduated from high school. So I got a chance to go see, at that point, they were making cars like 5 or 7 years ahead, maybe. No, it was like 4 because I remember they had the doors for the '07. I think it was Expeditions or something like that. Anyway, it was years ahead. And I had no idea that they were making car parts that far in advance. I was shocked. And so I got to learn all these cool things about the automotive industry. And I got to learn what it was like to work in an office environment. And I got to learn what it was like to be responsible for all the things like spreadsheets and data management and archival. And you sit in client meetings, and this is how you host a client. And this is how you treat a client when you're having a conversation with them. Listen, they're a vendor. They're trying to impress us so we can give them more business. Here's what that looks like. And here's how you handle a difficult client, right? So all the things that you normally would learn ideally if your family works white collar jobs or if your family works in a certain environment or even blue collar job. All those things you should maybe learn in your family but may not have a chance to. I got a chance to learn that at 18 years old. And if I'm not mistaken, I made 12. It was either 12 or about $14 an hour, which for an 18-year-old in 2003, that was a lot of money. So when I started my freshman year in Michigan, I was balling out. Like I came, my doorbell was lit. I had like 19 pillows. Everything was laid up, matchy matchy. Don't even get me started. But anyway, the point is, I got to make money, learn these really, really important skills about not just work in general, but the type of work that I was being prepared to do by going to college. And that was an invaluable experience. And it wasn't necessarily just fluff work. Like I actually worked, I want to say it was like all summer. So it probably was 12, somewhere between 12 and 16 weeks. I mean, it was a long time. That set me on a course to understand what corporate America was like, what it meant to have a job, a career. And I got to meet all these cool people and ask about their career trajectories. And they were all so different than me. And all of the things. So at 18, I was able to see something that up to that point I hadn't really seen before and hear a diversity of perspectives and experiences. So I bring that up because when you think about your social efforts, age is a huge component of that. How do you invest in the next generations? This also may involve you all making investments in healthcare. So if you think about the health and overall well-being of the communities in which you work and thrive as a company, you want people to be well enough to either buy your products or services or work for you. To be quite honest, if the community is too sick or too hurt or too disillusioned and disconnected to engage with your brand and your company, that's not good. And you likely have the power and the resources to do something about that. So that could be everything from getting involved in maternal health efforts, particularly for the BIPOC community, because those rates, especially for Black moms, are abysmal. It could involve you investing in pre-K and Head Start programs to make sure the kids have a chance to get off on the right start. It could involve you investing in early education programs. Another little quick story. One of my classmates, I was in this program called Junior Achievement. Some of you may know it. You might participate in it with your company. But this was third grade, I want to say, and somebody's parent, their dad worked for, I want to say it was IBM. So anyway, we got to work on this really dope urban planning project where we created our ideal city. And at 8, 9 years old, you're telling kids, look, what would you want your city to look like? What kind of parks? What kind of schools? Now, if you pay for this, then you only have enough money for this. And so we were learning about budget. I mean, at a very young age, budgets and making choices and trade-offs and opportunity costs. And of course, we don't always know the technical terms, but the concepts we were getting. And that really started me off of my road to understand urban planning and urban design and really what will become corporate governance and corporate leadership. So again, how you invest in the community around you speaks volumes. Even if you think about investing in elder care and for caregivers. So one thing the pandemic exposed was this idea that not only did parents need support, but some people, they have family members who needed to be in day programs. Maybe they had intellectual or developmental disabilities. They may have been caring for aging loved ones. And so they need support with that. So how do you invest in the nursing home or long-term care community in the communities in which you work and serve? Again, all of that's a part of that social component. And if you can't necessarily safely or legally see yourself being able to invest in that way, then at the very least, how do you provide benefits for your employees to make it easier for them to do it? So if you say, you know what, that's too much legal risk for us to get involved with making nursing homes safer, just as an example, do you offer extended benefits for family members? For example, someone had to end up caring for their parents or their grandparents or their siblings. Do you have a benefit, or is there EAP assistance for employees to get what they need so that they could be able to still work and still contribute to your company, but they can also take care of their family? It's not choosing either or. So again, that social component is not just localized to what's happening in your company. It's your company's presence and impact in the community at large. And then finally, with the social part, it's this world at large too. When we think about the social impact of the choices that we make, we are always othering someone. So if you think about it, and this was one of the first lessons that they taught us when I studied sociology at Michigan, somebody is always an other. So as a Black woman, I may be one of the most marginalized groups in the US, but because I'm a United States citizen, I'm likely marginalizing someone in what's considered a developing country. And if I am a younger person, like let's say 20s or 30s in a developing country, it's possible that I may be marginalizing the elderly in my community who need 24-hour care. Right. So there's always some layer of othering and marginalization. And so to that point, it's about thinking about how can I minimize the othering? How can I minimize the process of marginalizing someone else? And I think that many companies have shied away from that because, to be honest, it feels like socialism, right? It's like, I'm not responsible for that. I'm not taking care of other people. It's a merit based or whatever terminology you want to use. And I get it. Please understand me. I'm not a political channel. I don't get into that. But I do think that companies can no longer afford to pretend as though they don't have a responsibility to not only be aware, but be taking action to either minimize or avoid altogether that othering process. And it is possible. It's possible to do. It's going to take time. It could take that reconciliation piece we talked about. It could take you being more fully present. It could take you being much more future focused, but it needs to happen because we're going to run out of people to other. And if we think about it like a cycle or like a real ecosystem, the people who you eat today could be the people eating you tomorrow. So we want to be mindful at how we gobble up the social resources and social capital that everyone truly needs to benefit from. So with that being said, let's close out today with this thought. What does the social component of ESG mean to you personally? What's the biggest gap that you see in the work that you do in the way that you show up in ESG, the social component right now? What's your biggest gap? Tell me in the comments. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And of course, check me out in the next one. Thanks, everyone.